Yara nyilla domoro kadiyata.
Boy, janno CK's restaurant.
Sa nako be ninna dimbal. Nimba domoro kala janno.
Domoro seneyata adiyata topotoro fanan kendema bije. Luntan during tamala abeka domoro kijani. Adi manda wala de. Teka we bijele anim fanan ka fadi jang ikono e fa. E ka fa minne ko pastry anim bakery. Iko fanan bekalele. Badde lomba conference lomba workshop lomba ye fo fendin lon dunia kono. Domoro betama nyillom international o toda number 1.
Amanke ba domola jandama.
Esa domo jang is atariya.
Wo mu kubandi.
Sa nako sa futandi.
Oto sa nako be mu CK's restaurant.
Ndabana janno mu yat ni manje dorom bijam.
Aban.
CK's restaurant, known for best quality food and customer satisfaction.
Diwli lanni maro lanni
fop lanni
awa joni mi anda honno gerde ten e ngaldo sabu e ngaldo Ibrahima jonnal taw joni mi anda se yahay kapitiki nyawloden ha humpondire makko est ce qu'on non e warude
waden no
ane ko de Ibrahima ma ko to woni
mo Amerique
ko America woni kare humpitaki fi be musibe men baluwo be andanda kala ko wada wonde aduna si arrivi e juude mabbe a jonnay do dépassement Gambia har no weebi ayata kadi taw ko mbudi din no jawi walla no jippi be halantama ko kala ko falda ko reise sengo nyamete il nebba maro basal pomme de terre kala ko rewi dom a hendo to har no weebi kadi wona dum don tu be abbe jonnira mobile phone siko dum kadi laptop kala ko wayrode di ay kasba wa be waawma jonnude kadi sa wala umpitade ko weebi etti Google account ma joni data ton wada download app mabbe on ayay kala ko humpi may mabbe ton be weebi yama
ka wonda woy aduna on
kala ko waawda
a jonnana e wondo kaleji men Gambia do dépense
harano weebi hama si dum no fono nebi immo den joni mi dota ma ka place mabbe janno
waden joni
iya heba ko fala
waden kisam.
When we touch down, better broke down.
With Gamtel G-Fiber, now you can enjoy super fast internet in gigabytes. G-Fiber is affordable, stable, secured, and accessible to homes, businesses, and enterprises. With Gamtel G-Fiber, the future is speed. Gamtel, creating a brighter future in communication.
So she became mine and see the
In communication, connectivity is everything. We ensure that the links never sleep. Quantities and qualities, all in our data service, providing efficient, reliable voice and data service. We believe if you're not up to speed, then you're going backwards. Communications have to flow as fast as the speed of light. Whatever business you're in, having someone who understands your needs is critical. That is why we just don't offer you technology, we offer you solutions. Enjoy Gamcel's internet broadband anytime, anywhere. Your national operator, Gamcel, Yaibaram.
I get it.
Okay, mbijan ro aga nyaaji.
Albaka.
Mbaka important.
Yo, nga transfer la sto.
Ya transfer la.
Ha, code nyingi.
Okay. Korsa. Nsila ID soto.
Sa so. Sorry. I get it.
Mbijan ro.
Albaka.
Mbaka.
Bara alla service o tariya. Mbare ki janna nun kunu bara tariya.
Jannom yona forest de bureau. Gambia tonkon na no mbari ya bere. Birim koyna fo kato.
Bari si kodo kino kato ni fo bolong blabe.
56 branches mola sota Gambia jang.
Ha?
Gambia kono anin Gambia bantala bankol. Nka kodo kiya bere. Kodo sifa fo falindiro fo nyaadi lafta memmen na kodi to poto nin kodi maraw. Jannam number 1 di nyonta. Andum fana nata anoda enterprise sotale. Wolam nyindi ko domorol fana kol fana be firale le dadi manin domorol ni fana beteat. Gambia dawda yalo ma fa kendol sotale je.
Wo moyo diat.
Apelenta
ni wo ka ni lafta nyelen kendol e bina.
Yalo bu kanyi la ko la baraka ba.
Yalo ndel chosano lo.
Abaraka.
We live in a day and age where technology is creating a world without borders, filled with unlimited potential to improve the lives of the people around us. Innovarex Global Health ushers in a new way of leveling the playing field with increased access to quality healthcare services delivered at your doorstep. Our qualified professionals are equipped with state-of-the-art point-of-care testing technology to conduct tests such as kidney function, liver function, electrolyte tests, body composition, hemoglobin, A1C, and many more services with the highest efficiency in delivering results. The addition to our flagship Wellness on Wheels, more fondly known as WOW Delivery Service, brings the entire clinical experience full circle. IGH has remained committed to creating the future of healthcare delivery. Gone are the days of sending loved ones outside the country for basic medical services. Innovarex Global Health offers a new peace of mind and takes pride in delivering the quality of care we all deserve.
Hello and welcome to this special interview here from Kerr Fatou. It's a Mother's Day celebration and I have the greatest honor to host two gentlemen in my studios here at Tranquil, Mr. Manjang. I am happy to bring you back from retirement. I need an accountant and economist to handle Mr. Manjang here in our studios in Tranquil. Manjang, welcome to this special interview.
Thank you.
And of course, our guest this afternoon is Mr. Muhammed Manjang. Mr. Manjang is the former Managing Director of Social Security and Housing Finance Corporation. He led the institution for 3 years, from September, exactly 3 years, March 2017 to March 2020. Mr. Manjang, welcome to Kerr Fatou for the first time.
Thank you, Fatou.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you.
And happy Mother's Day.
Thank you very much. And of course, a happy Mother's Day to all of you out there watching us, wherever you are. We want to appreciate the role mothers play in our lives. They are the bedrock of our societies, and we want to thank them for everything they do. So Manjang, it's Mother's Day, but of course we're hosting Manjang here on Kerr Fatou.
Well, I think this is a historic moment. And the new Gambia needs a new Gambian. a new Gambian will not emerge without a new Gambian being cultivated. And when we cultivate a new Gambian, we need to change the traits that are inherent in who we are. The Gambia is so used to business as usual. And business as usual led us to these doldrums we found ourselves from independence to date. So what needs to change is we need corporate disruptors in our public enterprises, and we need public disruptors in the civil service proper. What is that? People who will come and change systems and procedures of doing things. Because if what we were doing was good, we won't be where we are. One thing that's for sure, Gambians are very resistant to change, and Gambians are happy having a substandard way of life. Now, we've been calling for civil service reform, and the reasons we've been calling for civil service reform is to give public servants the security of tenure. Security of tenure will give them the ability to do what they think is right. But right now, no one is protected, and we have seen the government of the Gambia once again having a musical chairs where people have been rotated and taken to institutions that they will not add any value towards the greater good's interests. So, having Mr. Manjang here, I think, will serve two purposes. We will know exactly what happened at Social Security, from where he took it, the value he has added, if there is any, and also what are the concerns, because Social Security is a safety net for pensioners. The investments that we do in such a place must not attract high risk. And secondly, we need to understand the demographics of this country, that today we have a youthful population. They will be entering the workforce. They will be contributing, and these contributions need to be put in good use so that when it comes time to really take care of them, the funds will be there. And over the past 22 years of JAME, we have seen how they've decimated Social Security. And not much has changed in the sense that, yes, they're not dipping in the hands of the coffers of the fund, but they are meddling in the management affairs of this institution.
If you say they, who?
Well, government.
Okay.
Because the Minister of Finance basically sits at the board, and they're very instrumental in advocating for government's interests. But sometimes government's interest is not the interest of the greater good, i.e. the people who put in monies in those funds. So, lesson learned, and if the government is serious, they will find ways to fine-tune and see how best to change the processes and reduce the interference, and also maybe see how best they will just hive off the housing portion of Social Security and allow Social Security to just be a straight investment house for pensioners.
Thank you very much, Nyangjai. You never disappoint. Anyway, but before we get into Social Security, first and foremost, for my viewers, who is Muhammed Manjang?
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon
to the viewers, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers watching the show.
Yeah.
I am Muhammed Manjang. I am born and bred in Gambia. Like I said a couple of times ago, my father, the blessed memory, Alhaji Bora Manjang, was my father. He hailed from Birkamanding in the Central River region. I am married, and I'm blessed with 2 children. Like I said, I studied in the UK. Initially I did my chartered accounting in the UK. When I qualified and returned back to the Gambia, I started work with Gambia National Insurance Company, and for a very brief period, then went on to National Investment Board. I spent about 2 years in National Investment Board, and I must say those were very formative years in my career. And I'm very grateful to the likes of Abdoulaye Baksture, who was the CEO at the time, and Mr. Mamadou Odunjai, who was my line director at the time. I think they played a critical role in forming me at that early stage of my career. I had the opportunity, whilst working with NIP, to be seconded to a World Bank program, but it's a program mainly to do with the restructuring and the privatization of GPMB. So I guess restructuring is pretty much in my pedigree because I've kind of dealt with it before.
Okay.
So I kind of did that with GPMB with a World Bank team, which led to the privatization of GPMB. On completion of that, I was then hired by Standard Chartered Bank, where I went to and spent about 20 years, 17 plus of which was as an expatriate, working in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. But clearly with Standard Chartered, I had the opportunity also to work and live in 7 different countries. In Africa, I've experienced both West, East, South, Southern Africa. I've worked in all of those regions. In some of them, I've worked in regional roles. Some have actually been involved in the re-entry, say in the South African market, in the re-entry of the bank into the South African market. The bank exited South Africa during the apartheid days, and then on the end of apartheid, it re-entered, and I played a significant role in that re-entry. And then I've been involved in mergers and acquisitions over that period. I've dealt with system implementations, capital management over that period of time, and also restructuring generally, and also established bank in a greenfield site for the first time. Cote d'Ivoire, we established Standard Chartered in Francophone for the first time in Cote d'Ivoire around 2000. That was just about the time the coup happened in Cote d'Ivoire. Yes. In fact, I think I was in Cote d'Ivoire when that coup took place. Yeah. So we did that.
Yeah.
And in fact, anecdote in Cote d'Ivoire, a very interesting story, because we were 3 Anglophone speakers, one Cameroonian, myself, and another colleague of mine who was also Gambian. So the 3 of us actually were the ones who were entrusted with the setup of the bank in Cote d'Ivoire. Now, but we are Anglophone, and we're in a Francophone country. Yeah. So clearly you can imagine, we don't have an office set up. We're claiming to represent an Anglophone and a British bank, but there is no white man in our midst.
Yeah.
And so we're going about, in fact, recruiting, and we were recruiting in a hotel, and when we called for interview, we were calling people to come into a hotel room for an interview. So you can imagine there was a lot of, people were not too sure, they were not really comfortable. Are they real? Are they 419ers? Because, but then that bank became very successful. I think when we set it up, after a couple of years, it started making profits in the ranges of $15 million initially. And then that, clearly there was initial stage of loss. When you set up a business, you don't expect it to be profitable. But if you have the proper structures in place, it's a matter of time if everything is put right. That is a very successful bank now. It is, I'm not sure exactly now what the profitability is, but certainly at the time I was leaving the bank, I know it was hitting around 15, 20 million within a span of, we started in 2000, so within a span of 15 years or so, it was already over 15 million. Wow. And I also participated in the re-establishment of the bank in Nigeria. Nigeria is probably the biggest bank for Standard Chartered in the Africa region now. Probably it is in that region. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would not be surprised if it is hitting profitability of around $100 million now. But I don't know the exact numbers. But I would suspect it will be, if not there, it will be close to that or probably more than that.
Wow. So over 20 years of banking experience, what's your assessment of the banking industry in the Gambia?
I won't pretend to know the banking.
Do you think we should have up to 14 plus banks, 10 plus in a country with just 2 million people?
They all claim to be profitable. At least most of them are profitable. So I guess there is some opportunity for them. Otherwise, I think the thing with the banks is they will not be here simply just because they want to be here. They're here maybe because they're making something. There was a proliferation of banks here, I think to a large extent, because Nigeria at some point because I used to go to Nigeria quite a lot. I understand the market there at the time. I know a lot of the banks were hugely capitalized. When Nigeria went through their own banking crisis, they forced mergers between banks so that the capital levels can be. Now, when you overcapitalize a bank, you are then forced for the returns. And in the Nigerian market at the time, actually expanding out of the source of Nigeria was influencing the market price of the banks in their stock exchange. And that necessitated a lot of the bank to actually expand out. So that resulted to Nigerian banks going to Africa generally, because they had such a significant capital base. To make that capital efficient, they really need to go out. And that led to a lot of the banks going. But I guess they continue to be here. Either there is an opportunity for them, or suddenly they're making some profit. Otherwise, I don't think they will be. Now, but coming back to your question about banking here, there's not really much for me to comment on there, except to say, in terms of their compliance with central banks' requirements, most of them are hugely capital. Their capital base is quite solid. They're very liquid because there isn't really much lending in this bank. If you look at a lot of the banks here, I think their lending is somewhere around, one metric that banks use is something like a loan to deposit ratio. A lot of banks will aim to be around 75–80% loan to deposit ratio. Here, a lot of banks are under 30% loan deposit ratio. So there isn't really much lending within the banking sector. But I guess because all bank lending here tends to be very short term. Banks here tend to fund mainly trade, transactional things. That's what they normally fund. But in a country like us, we're really looking funding into more long-term funding. That is really what is required to move the country forward. Otherwise, it will only be transactional. And transactional, because a real investment, the money needs to stay in the investment for a time for it to start yielding dividend. So in terms of creating employment, in terms of development, infrastructure development, those cannot be funded over a 1 year, 2 year period. Those are really longer time funding. And I think banks generally find it difficult to do that because their deposits are generally very short term in nature. It's really predominantly you find banks deposits mainly current accounts, which contractually is on a day-to-day. So if you have funding which is short term, you cannot go into a significant long-term mismatch. You cannot do a short-term lending. So you cannot have short-term funding and then go on to do long-term lending. That mismatch, not many banks will do.
So for a country, I think it's also important to look at the role private banks and financial institutions play in the development of countries. What specific role do you think financial institutions can play to help the development of the Gambia? Because, as we always say, our economic is private sector-led growth, right? What role can banks especially play to make sure the country's development is progress?
Well, I think they're doing what they can in the environment. See, banks are constrained by a couple of things. One is the capital. There's a certain amount of the relationship of your lending. Your lending has a relationship with your capital. So, for example, most banks here cannot really lend beyond $1 million or $2 million. It will be difficult. But most banks can't. So they will either have to syndicate, which is not happening a lot here, or once in a while you go to central bank and ask for an exemption because you are breaching that regulatory limit. So the banks will tell you a single obligor lend. So for example, you cannot lend more than say 25% of your capital to a single name. Now when you have a 200 million capital base or a 300 million capital base, for example, or say if you have a 200 million, you're really talking about maybe $40–50 million you can lend to a single name. Now $40–50 million it may sound a lot of money, but it's not really material money for a development purpose. So I think that's a constraint in a market like here. But banks are doing, because they are funding trade finance. They are funding some, if you look at, say, the hotel sector, a lot of the hotel development in this country now is pretty much funded by the banks. You know, there are banks that are really participating in the growth, particularly in the hotel sector.
And now I know COVID-19 is here. I just want to adjust my banking before we get to social security. COVID-19, we all know we might just get into a Great Depression. You know, stocks are going down. Economies are experiencing difficult times right now. What would be your advice to investors, businesses? Is this the time to buy shares? Is this the time to invest in savings? What would just be your advice? Because to people like me who are just worried right now how to spend, because you know people are saying, oh, if you have money, buy houses, buy shares in businesses. But what would be your advice at this to investors at this critical time in the economy of the country, the world at large?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty. You know, I think to really discuss COVID or its impact or how long it will take, you really need to have a model on. You really need to have a model on the disease itself, i.e., when it will peak, how long it will be, when we will recover from it. I think these are all unknowns at this point in time. Yes, people are thinking around them. Even if you look at the big businesses in the world, if you look at businesses like Apple, businesses like your Netflix, these are, I mean, Apple, Amazon, and so these are trillion-dollar businesses, and Microsoft, they are trillion-dollar businesses. Most of those businesses are actually withdrawing their guidance to the markets. They are withdrawing their guidance because they are saying, we really have no idea what the next couple of months will look like with COVID. And therefore, we cannot, with any certainty, give you an indication of what performance will fall. And I think that is an indication to the rest of us that this is clearly uncertain. Now, a lot of them are preserving liquidity. Like, say, in this country, for example, the central bank has instructed the banks to cancel out all their planned dividend payments for this year, for example. Now, because it is important in the period of uncertainty to conserve liquidity, because you really don't know what's going to happen, and you will need that liquidity. If you don't have it, it will actually kill a lot of businesses as this thing unfolds. Now, so I think that's just to give context. Now, in terms of investors, when you say buy shares, I don't know whether you are talking about buying shares in international markets or buying shares here.
International.
Clearly, this is not a very bad time to buy shares if you are into buying shares.
It's not a good time.
The problem with a lot of people is in times like this, there's a lot of fear, and markets respond. So markets at some point in March, for example, around mid-March, thereabout, they were probably at levels not seen. I'm not sure whether you've heard this term called Black Monday.
Yes.
Somewhere around 1987, when the market in a single day took a drop of almost 25% or so. I mean, the market fall around mid-March got to points which are even worse than the Black Monday. I mean, some were down over 30% or so within a very short space of time. But incredibly, if you look at the US market, for example, they have almost recovered back to the pre-COVID times. But a lot of the European markets are still in the doldrums. They have not responded. Now, markets are said to be forward-looking. So hopefully, markets are trying to tell us that this pandemic, as far as economic is concerned, is not going to be as significant as we feared. Now, I think that's what markets are indicating. But with all that, there's a lot of caution, and they are not providing. But I think it goes without doubt that this will result to a recession, certainly in the West, and it will come to us. There's no doubt about that. If we look at it, I know right now a lot of people are focusing on just the hotel sector because they are directly impacted, and they are probably the first to be impacted. But it will go beyond that. If you go to your market seller, the guy producing the narcos, for example, because there are no lumos, because there is really no open market, their produce are not moving, they will have problem feeding their people. You know, yes, government is helping with rice, but that's a very short term. You know, there may also be, I mean, a lot of countries are doing both fiscal and monetary interventions. You know, so at some point, that might have to be a consideration. I think it is good to feed people, but it is also good to be thinking of ways to sustain the economy, because that's the longer term solution. What is currently happening with the feeding is more short term. But I don't know, maybe government is already working on this plan. Since I am not privy to it, I am only talking about things that I know for a fact other economies and countries are doing, and maybe we are doing, but I'm not privy, so I cannot tell. But I know for a fact it will be foolhardy to sit and expect that this will be a short-term impact on us.
Now we move to social security.
Well, before we move to social security, I think Mr. Manjang has clearly explained the banking sector in the Gambia and its implication. And I think the biggest weakness in our banking sector is minimal financial intermediation. Why? Because the sector is not deep as it relates to instruments, especially medium to long-term instruments. So the Central Bank of the Gambia needs to play a pivotal role in creating instruments that the market wants to buy. See, there's one thing throwing stuff or floating stuff out there. There's another thing of absorbing it. What does the market want? Because investors will buy what they want based on the anticipated return on these things. So the market needs to be deepened a little bit, and we need to have, you know, over-the-counter whereby people can buy treasury bills and discount treasury bills before maturity. So the central banking system in Gambia is not robust, and that's where monetary management needs to do a little bit more so that financial intermediation in the country will not only be inclusive but very, very active. On the issue of COVID, he's very right, because there are three policies that this government must have put in place from day one, and that is, during the advent of COVID, they should have a containment / sensitization. That's the first role, to make sure that we inform people and try to contain the disease. The second step is to mitigate. And in mitigation, you try to make sure that the economy has a soft landing. And that's where we expect creative fiscal and monetary management policies from the government. And the third and final step is recovery. What is the government doing to make sure that this economy recovers from the blow and the shock of COVID?
That's where I wanted to come in, actually. So because a lot of money is coming into the country, we have seen donor partners pumping a lot of money in the country. If that is injected in the economy, would you think that will help to stimulate? I am a layperson and I don't know these things. That's why I'm relying on you. Will that help? Because there's a lot of money coming in. If that is injected into the economy, because I think even in America, because they're giving stimulus packages to people, that money goes back into the system. I'm just hoping that's why they're giving to support. Would that not help the economy to just keep it afloat?
It depends on what kind of help. Right now, government should look at two things. Do we want to make sure we cushion the unemployment rate? If the answer is yes, meaning government don't want a lot of people to get off the payroll, how can government do that? You incentivize employers to make sure that they keep people that they would have just followed or laid off because they don't have a need for them. And that will boost the payroll. If it boosts the payroll, there will be income and disposable income. With disposable income, the economy will really thrive. And secondly, I think government has focused so much on the social aspect of just buying rice and giving people. No, what the government should have done is to use this COVID as an opportunity to be inward looking towards our food supply chain as a country. Meaning, $743 million of the hard-earned taxpayers' money or benevolent donors should have been spent on Jahali Pachar, the floodplains of Dankunku and others, because rice is a short-term measure. If they start growing rice in June, by end September, they would have had something and there will be sustainability going forward. But if you take 743 million, you buy rice today, it will be consumed and becomes a zero-sum for society. So strategically, I think the government must change their game plan, must go back to the drawing board and said, in every crisis, there is a silver lining. And the silver lining behind COVID is to make sure we realign our economy to make sure it's inward looking in as much as possible by having import substitution strategies that will really help the Gambian economy to grow internally. Because today, if the world shuts down, we will still eat. Then we will be forced to start growing. Why don't we do that now? So these are the things that the government must look into, and also to understand that this economy will not grow if we just rely on trade finance. This economy will grow if the government induces development. And for them to induce development, there has to be an alignment between the term structure of depositor funds and the needs of the investors who are looking for cash. You cannot have a 365-day paper when I want to build a factory that has an ROI of 24 years. So that mismatch is the thing that the central bank must look into to induce investments for private sector.
And so, Manjang, what do you think, these monies coming, how would it help our economy to sustain, especially post-COVID crisis?
Well, I think back to the point that Nyang is making. It's about really going back and strategically looking at it.
Yeah.
It should not really be just focused on, it's not an operational expense thing you spend. It's not those kind of recurrent expenses. It's more really trying to address it strategically. And I think that is what is important. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us to really sit back and see where we can direct some of those funds to make a difference. There's a need to address the short term. That is absolutely necessary. But I think more fundamentally, it's really about an opportunity. I think with COVID, really we should be asking ourselves, things cannot be as they were before. Everything has to change now. I think this is pushing change on us, and we have to take it and really do the best with it. I think there's a lot of talk about money coming. Sometimes you need to really get to the details of the structure of that fund that's available, because sometimes it's structured in such a way you're really not necessarily getting funding. You may be getting some items in kind. So until you really understand that, it's really difficult to say how much is here, how much of this can be. I know for now, at least that we know, it seems to be coming out of the budget to do so. But I think really it's going back strategically, looking at it and say how do we take advantage of the situation and really use it as an opportunity to change the way we do things in the country.
Yeah, I think very much. I think that's a great background just to give us.
But also on the thing about the deepening of the financial market, which is a very critical point. I think it is also probably in the Gambians in general invest a lot of money here, but we tend to spend a lot of that on just buildings. It's just about building now. Buildings are not productive.
No. Are they not?
No, but they're not productive.
I'm thinking if you build a house today, in 1 year the value is...
But the ROI is not interesting.
Yeah. So it would have been really better to have created, in terms of pushing the economy to grow, the building on its own, what will it do for you?
Yeah.
How will it contribute in the growth? So that money, if we could channel it, because people putting money in building are really investing for the long term.
Yeah.
So if that fund can be captured in some other way, those people will also be willing to direct that fund, if you had, say, the capital markets, where businesses that will actually grow this economy. It is the businesses that will grow the economy. It is those businesses that are really not getting funding.
Yes.
They cannot get funding from the banks, the long term. So you must find, in all the economies that have grown, their growth did not really come from banks financing. It has come to a large extent from money markets, insurance sector, people who can afford to do long-term investment.
But then people, Gambians in the diaspora especially, will tell you, I have said this many times, you come home, you invest, and you see government giving tax breaks to these big corporations. And as a startup business, as a small business, there is no incentive, basically no incentive for startup businesses in this country. And these are businesses that will also help in the growth of the economy. But how do we even invest in businesses when we are not giving any incentives? Most of the small businesses are not growing. Right. We are stagnant. We are at the same place because we don't have any support. What kind of support should be given to small startup businesses, especially people who are trying to come back home to invest? But then you go around, you go to GAIPA websites, you go to all these places, there's basically nothing for us there. And then the next day you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to build a house because I rent it out and, you know, the value grows next year. That is what is happening right now. What kind of help do you think should be rendered to businesses like this, small businesses that are coming into the country?
I mean, a lot of other countries will do what you mentioned. Tax breaks is there. Soft loans is there. But even management skills, management competence, providing you support, management support. A lot of businesses fail simply because they do not have the capacity, whether it is management, whether it is system. So really, if you provide support, both from funding, both from tax breaks, both from management, a lot of business can thrive. I mean, not every business will survive.
Absolutely.
You know, that's for granted, regardless of what help government or anybody gives. Some businesses will simply fail. But you don't need 100% success for them to assist in growing the economy. You know, sometimes you really need a hit rate of somewhere around 60% or so, and we will transform the economy. Absolutely. But it needs some kind of support. And that's one, but it's also about the infrastructure that the businesses rely on, from electricity, from the road network, from the communication. These are all enabling environments. So it has to be a combination of all of these things to really start making a difference.
Wow. Thank you very much. I think that, that just gives them an idea as to the status of the financial institutions in the country. And now let's go back to social security. In 2017, you took over as the managing director. What kind of company did you take over in 2017 when you came in?
Well, it was a company in a stressed. The company was stressed. Stressed in the sense that you look at what fundamentally we are set out to do. We have 3 constituent funds in Social Security and 1 housing. So we have the National Provident Fund, the Federated Pension Scheme, and the Injuries Compensation Fund. Now, all of these schemes, the pension fund, for example, I had the last actuarial valuation before I got there, which was 2014. That scheme had an actuarial deficit of about 518 million. Now, basically, that is saying to you that this fund is unable, if it was to wind down on that particular day, it will not be able to meet its liabilities. You know, so basically, it was insolvent, if you like. Now, but actuarial deficits do happen. Let me be clear on that. It is not as if these things don't happen. They happen. I mean, even in the West, especially when investment rates start falling, you actually see actuarial deficits. And there will always be arrangements with the fund members, particularly the employers, how to fund that actuarial deficit over a period of time. So this do happen. Now, ours, that was the very first time it happened in 2014. But it was moving from a surplus of 84 million in 2011 to a deficit of 514 million. So that's a significant drop in a space of 3 years. And that was worrying. You know, and several factors were contributing to that. One, the cost trend was too high. As of 2016, for example, when we asked the World Bank team to do a mini actuarial review for us, because as of 2018, because we were overdue for actuarial, and they were here, we took advantage of it and asked them to do a mini review so we get a sense of where we were. When they did the review, what they came out, and this was quite concerning to us, was that this is again a very critical metric in the pension industry, that our cost to contributions was running at about 70%. Now, a 70% ratio is quite worrying. you know, because that is not really giving you much room to, because normally, like Nyang was saying initially, we have a very young workforce. Our pensioners, if you look at the pension fund, the membership is around the region of 15,000 members. And the active pensioners was somewhere around 3,000 or so active pensioners. Now, that dependency ratio is very low, which is what you would expect in a young fund. Now, if the dependency ratio is that low in a young fund, you would expect that every year, when your contributions you receive will be significantly more than your expense, plus your benefits payout. So you have to leave a little every year to invest for future generations. If you're not having the surplus to invest for future generations, you will very soon run into a problem. Now, ours was estimated to have run into problems this year, 2020, if we had not done anything to reverse the trend. Because 2016, our cost was 271 million. That is a very high. Yeah. And the trend was double-digit growth in cost. So if we had continued on that same trend, 2016 was what was 271 million. If we had continued on that same trajectory, in 2017, our cost would have been somewhere around 311 million. Oh. That's not sustainable. That was just a matter of time. We were bringing in contributions at that level of somewhere around 300 million. So we would actually be using every single contribution that comes in on expense. Yeah. So we will not even have, so we will have to rely on the investment income to pay benefits. That was not sustainable. So something needs to be done. No, so in 2017, we had to start focusing on bringing the cost down. And the first year, we brought the cost down somewhere around 88, 90 million without impacting our operations. Now, that was not easy.
Yes.
That was really difficult.
Yeah.
But it was absolutely necessary.
Now I want to cut you in there.
Yeah.
I believe your problem started soon as you inherited the position. And the reason why your problem started was business as usual was going to be shelved in order to make Social Security as an entity viable financially. And the only way you could have done it is to improve on cost efficiencies, reduce your expenditures in as much as possible. That brings about a lot of resistance. So that's why I tend to believe that people who are disruptive in nature as it relates to management styles always tend to have problems executing, especially if the principles are not supporting the disruptive nature and process that is to bring the organization back to good health. In the Gambia, what we have seen, and it's very unfortunate, that when you took over Social Security, we saw the staff behaving in a manner that was not consistent with their medium to long-term interests. Because if they continued the trajectory that the operational expenses were growing, maybe in another 3 to 4 years, most of them would have been out of a job, let alone the people who own the investments.
Yeah.
But I believe the biggest problem there was the government. We're not understanding what's really, or what was really happening in Social Security, or they're not sophisticated to understand the impact of their inactions. And they should have nipped it off the board there and then to make sure that Social Security not only have a turnaround, but become what is expected and safeguard the interests of the investors, i.e. pensioners.
Yeah.
So from there on to date, the resistance was not curbed by government in terms of showing the people there that this place need to make a U-turn.
Some people will tell you, Nyang, I've spoken to some members of the staff of Social Security, and they will tell you, yes, there was some issues, especially with the former government dipping into our funds, but Social Security, out of all the parastatals in the country, has the biggest investments in this country. For example, Social Security, I think, owns the largest shares in Trust Bank, They own 100% GTSC. They own Ocean Bay Hotel, 100%. They have shares in GNPC, I think Gum Petroleum. Gum Petroleum. So that is a big investment. People will argue that's a big investment.
Investment is not the size. It's the quality of the investment.
But how much is that value? What is the value of that?
No, but owning 100% of GTSC is a social liability. Okay. You need to understand that the figures, owning 100% of nothing amounts to nothing. So, Social Security funds, pensioners' funds, were not efficiently put to use to make sure it gives them the return that is needed to make sure they can cater for the present pensioners and future would-be pensioners. And that's why a disruptor needed to come in, streamline the processes, make sure that there's efficiency in the expenses that will bring in the returns. And that's where the government failed.
Which government?
Our government.
Because this government brought in a dispute, somebody you're talking about.
Bringing in a disruptor is one thing. Empowering and protecting the disruptor is another thing, and that's where the government failed.
What did you do when you came in?
But let me, I think it's important to just rectify that.
Okay.
Take Social Security as any bank.
Yeah.
When you go and you put your deposit in the bank, and then I take your deposit and put it in treasury bills, am I going to turn around and say this bank is doing well? I've taken your 10, I've put treasury bills 10. Or if I take your 10 and then all you come and look at me, I'm having 9. Am I doing well? Because I have treasury bills? Now remember, Social Security had monies coming through from contributors up to about 5.7 billion. If you look at the value of those investments, they are not necessarily 5.7 billion. They're less than 5.7 billion.
Precisely.
So you don't look at the assets and conclude that you're doing well. You need to look at a couple of things. One, you need to look at your pension fund, for example, and see whether the assets you have are sufficient to cover the liabilities that you're expected to pay. And like I told you, as of 2014, the answer to that was no. In fact, it was in deficit about 518 million. So that's one. Two, you look at the Provident Fund, and you say the purpose of the Provident Fund is about savings. Are we paying interest on the people who own that fund? The answer to that question also is no. Because from 2012, we paid about 3% of interest, then it dropped to 0.19%, then to 0.12%, then to 0.03%. And then in 2017, or 2016, we paid 0. 2017, we paid 0. Now, these are periods when bank interest rates on deposits or even treasury bills was in double digits.
Absolutely.
So, and inflation was significantly more than 3%. So in real terms, you were losing money.
Negative.
Now, so regardless of whether we own 37% of Trust Bank, regardless of whether we own 100% of GTSC, regardless of whether we own 16.3% of Standard Chartered Bank, or whether we own 31% of GP, doesn't matter, because the fundamentals were not reflecting what we should be.
Exactly.
And that is what's important.
So tell us, what did you do exactly when you came in, just to make sure your current costs?
Yeah.
What were some of the basic stuff that you had to do? Like, you know, I know, just like Nyang said, when you come in and you want to make certain changes, it brings a lot of resistance, and which it did. What were some of the things that you did?
We actually did quite a few things in 2017 when I came. I know it is only the cost that people are focusing on.
Yeah.
We also started looking at the institutional assessment, because like, you see, if you look at, if you're familiar with fund management, and if you, I'm not going to compare ourselves necessarily to OECD countries, but in OECD countries, your expense ratio is expected. In fact, if you give somebody an expense ratio of 5%, they will tell you it's too high. Now, if you're familiar with Vanguard or you're familiar with ETFs, the expense ratio on those funds is somewhere around, some are less than 1%. You know, now some ETFs are, so if you go to say somebody like Fidelity, their fund rates tend to be expensive, but none beyond 2.5% or 3% or so. But again, they are sizable, so there's some economies of scale there, so you can expect that. So middle to high income countries, you will expect the ratio to be somewhere around 1 to 2%, which is acceptable. in say countries like ours, up to 10% ratio is acceptable because our fund sizes are small and structurally it's always problematic. So about 10% is acceptable. Now I told you we were running at 70%. So that is one. So that tells you two things. One, there are certain costs that we are spending on which were unnecessary and we need to trim down. That's number one. But two, as an institution, we were overburdened.
Yes.
We were overburdened. I mean, we manage funds. We don't need about 400 people to do that. Now, whenever you say this, people kind of get scared because there's no employment here. But you see, you need to create efficiency to create employment.
Absolutely.
So we need to first create efficiency internally within Social Security. Once we do that, we will be able to generate sufficient profitability that will allow us to invest in other things, to productive sectors, so that we can create employment. Because like I said, Social Security has the biggest pool of long-term investable funds in this country. Yes. No other institution have that much money as Social Security in terms of ability to place it long-term. Social Security can place funds for 20, 30 years without really being bothered. Because you enter employment at the age of 20, and you expect to leave at the age of 60, so even before 20. So really, every month you are contributing. Now, effectively, there is 40 years time there. And like I said, the dependency ratio is low. Before we get to the point where that reverses or equates, it's not here yet.
Yeah.
But we need to manage efficiently in order to create the opportunities.
Yeah. And in managing those funds efficiently, one thing that I've seen that's been missing at Social Security, it was more about human resources than systems. And in fund management, risk mitigation are very, very primary.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen systems in place to make sure that the Social Security, Provident Fund, pension funds, and others have a good risk mitigation systems, not people, but systems.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, our systems are horrible. They're really very bad. We implemented those systems sometime in 2008. There's a number of loopholes in the system. Right now, they're not integrated. When they were first built, I guess they were integrated, but along the way, that dropped. So we basically have standalone systems. There are no effective controls in the system. So you actually try to get workarounds around the problem, and you end up having very manual processes. So some of the processes are quite labor intensive. Now we've been working to change the systems. In fact, the board had already approved for system change, but that also coincided with when all those interruptions were happening. So that kind of derailed that plan. So like I said, 2017, it was not just about the cost, it was also about the institutional review. It was also about looking at even the hotels, Ocean Bay. The Ocean Bay and Sun Beach were leased, I mean, again, Jam, of course, but were leased to BPI investment. And on Ocean Bay, we were getting like 14,000 euros per month. And on Sun Beach, about $10,000 a month. Those were a ridiculous amount. The yields are less than 0.03%. It's ridiculous on the value of the property. So really, that's ridiculous. And so I think I started communicating with the Ocean Bay guys somewhere around May to say we are terminating the lease. And in fact, we engaged. So they took us to court. We were in court. We were back and forth in court until the Janneh Commission came in. And as part of their dealings with Westwood, they put those hotels on the receivership. Now, I don't think that should have been. In fact, we challenged that at the commission, but clearly we did not prevail. But then hotels have been given back to us at the conclusion of the Janneh Commission. And now, obviously, that's again disrupted by COVID-19, but we were able to generate from the hotels in 3 months what we were getting in 1 year. So if we do a full year on the hotels, we will get nothing less than 1.5 million euros. And these are hotels we were getting less than 200,000 euros, so about 250,000 euros.
Wow.
You know, so yeah, like some of the liabilities with us, we actually initiated action on trying to recover those funds even before the Janneh Commission came on. We took the receiver of Yaya's properties to court somewhere around, I think, May or so. You know, well before the Janneh Commission started, to try to recover the funds back. So all of those things were happening, but at the same time, we were also looking at the cost and saying, listen, we cannot, it does not make sense. We simply cannot continue the way we were. So there was a lot of things, and you know, I mean, change is never easy. I guess we could have managed it better, but we are where we are. But these things, they were necessary.
And I know, just like, I know I worked in Parastatal, I worked in Gamtel, whenever they talk about downsizing, whenever they talk about, you know, letting some people go, that has always been really things that people will always advocate against, because people are thinking about losing jobs. You just mentioned Social Security had over 400 staff you needed to cut. Were there at any point that you were able to downsize staff-wise during your tenure?
No,
Wow.
we have not been able. We have not been able because we have to get that approved by the board. So we have to go through a process to convince the board that this is necessary. So that was one. But again, like I said, when the report came out, it was around the end of 2017.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think some of the content of the report were leaked.
Yeah.
And I think, so the communication was not properly done, because we, I mean, people started talking about the report before we even formally communicate and say how we are going to implement it. And then by April or so of the following year, the crisis started. We took the best part of 2018, you know. So, and then, you know, you go through reforming the board, restructuring the board. So by the time we had the opportunity to present the report to the board was in 2020. But what we have not done, we have just followed the natural attrition. So as and when people go on retirement, we were not filling the positions. So that had taken quite a number of people out of the system.
Now let's talk about the crisis, of course. I know it did derail a lot of things during your tenure. In 2018, a lot of the staff came out and accused you of so many things: corruption, favorism, and some went really far. And it went to a point, it became really bad, and the government had to step in to do an investigation. But during that process, so many documents started leaking. For example, the Ombudsman's report, which came out, and a lot of things came out. People that were against you said, this is the guy who was saying, I'm cutting costs. I'm trying to bring best practices to this institution. Why is he not returning per diems that he's supposed to return? Why is he cutting the staff's benefits and still having his entertainment vault and using it with his family? Why is he buying the mobile phones for this much? Why is he giving probations to giving scholarships to people who are on probation? These are service rules. All of these things came. When you saw the report, all of these things that you were accused of were on that report. Especially because, like I said to myself, Manjang is one person that, like we all said, that's the guy. But for him to not return per diem until he was told to do, and he did, why that?
You know,
why would we? How would we say that's the guy we trusted?
You know, I just find these things really. I can understand.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, but I find it amazing. Now let me explain to you. I know this per diem has been on and on and on.
Yeah.
So I hope this time we can put it to rest, because
okay.
if not, I am not going to talk about it anymore.
Yes.
But let me put this thing at rest.
Yeah.
The entire 3 years I've been Social Security, I can count my travels on my fingertips. I have not traveled even 10 times when I've been in Social Security. Twice I traveled for ESA regional conference. Twice I traveled to Paris for an arbitration around the ferries. That's 4. I traveled another one for an Easter conference to Morocco, and I traveled for a Celta Afrique meeting, and I traveled to Dakar for Senegalo-Gambian Secretariat meeting. That, if I can remember, I traveled also to Ghana recently. So if I can remember, those are the only travels I've done in Social Security for the 3 years that 3 years plus that I've been there. This is a place that I could have traveled if I wanted almost every month.
Yeah.
So if it is about per diem,
yeah,
I think I would be traveling every day. I'll be going. I'm going.
But then the question is why
I'm coming.
Yeah.
I'm coming. I'm saying, so the Dakar trip, let me explain the
Yeah.
circumstances.
Yeah.
The Dakar trip came about because I went to the Senegalo-Gambian. I was invited by the Sierra Leone Social Security institution, sister institution, who we have apparently a very cordial and good relationship with. They were opening their tribunal, and they invited me to go there as their guest, and they wanted me to give a speech. And at the same time, they also asked me to invite the director of labor to come with me so he can give a technical paper. I had no intention of going because I felt really I don't want to go for this. Then I was going on the Senegalo-Gambian, then the corporate affairs came to say, listen, we have a good relationship with these people. I think it is in our interest to maintain that relationship. But by that time, it was really close to go and ask for a SCOT approval. In my view, we have asked for SCOT approval for every travel.
Yeah.
There isn't a single travel that I've went on we did not. I don't necessarily think SCOT approval is part of the process. It is something from a days. It's almost like also telling me that if I'm traveling, I need clearance to travel.
Yes.
So, but anyway, nonetheless, there wasn't time. But for me, as my head of the corporation, I have to make a judgment call. I am responsible for $270 million vote as at the budget of the time. That is what I make a call on every day. I make approval on that every day. Now, I don't think it is an issue for me to make a judgment call on $100,000 sitting if I am making a judgment call on the 200 million. And I made the call on the premise that the director of labor has sought approval from SCOT and was granted an approval for the same meeting that I was also going to. I cannot see how mine can be turned down if the director of labor owns the stone. So on the basis of that, I said, okay, I think it is okay. Because of the relationship, it makes sense for me to go. There wasn't time to seek for approval. And I went. I was in Dakar. Dakar, unfortunately, I missed a flight. Now, these things do happen. Yeah. Now, some people will argue and say, yes, no, but these things do happen.
It does, yeah.
I missed a flight. I actually tried to reroute myself at the airport. And I have been telling people the only way that anybody in this country knew that I missed a flight and I didn't go is because I called and tell them. Otherwise, there's no way anybody would know. If my intention was to just sit there, there's no way anybody would know. Now, when I'm in Dakar, I could not, there are two things. Flights to Gambia is not every day. Yeah. It's either I ask a driver to drive and come and pick me up, or I wait for the next scheduled flight, which is what I did. Now, people's argument is, because I did not travel to Freetown, therefore I should refund the per diem. But was I not in Dakar?
You were. You were in Dakar.
Yeah. But anyway, but nonetheless, I said, okay, fine. I mean, if people are telling me procedure you should approve, you should have gotten SCOT approval, you did not get SCOT approval, you did not travel to Freetown, I said, okay, I'll pay. But when I stayed home, my salary for 2 months that I did not take was more than the 100,000 per diem. Yeah. So, you know, so I just find it like...
Fatou, you see, I think the biggest problem we have in this country is distraction.
Yes.
And that's one thing that's making us falter. Administration must be about issues, not personalities. And unfortunately, we have brought personalities, not only in Social Security, but generally in public administration. We have brought personalities to the forefront to the point we're losing the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is productivity, efficiency, and viability. We don't worry about this. Per diem, fine. $100,000 is fine. Is that the bigger picture for Social Security? I think people have been hitting on a dead horse, if you ask me, and I will tell you why.
I don't think so, though.
Well, allow me, just allow me.
All right, go ahead.
See, when you have issues, they're all priorities, but in competing priorities, you must prioritize your priorities. Social Security, we're bleeding, and the loss on a quarterly basis is over 200 times, or even 5,000 times that $100,000 is people have been focusing their attention on. But notwithstanding, I believe here what the public, what the government, because I've seen that report.
Yes.
And honestly, it's trivial, and not only trivial, it's not worth the public's time to be making, even constituting a body to even look into that thing. And that's why I want us as a people to move away from administration that's personality-based to administration that's issue-based. The issue at hand is you have pensioners who rely on funds from Social Security. Will those funds be there when those people reach the age of retirement? If we spend our energies on those things, we will do a service to the pensioners. But following trivial and minute things is not in the interest of the people who are putting in money month in, month out in Social Security. And honestly, it's even a waste of our airtime right now.
No, it's not.
No, it is.
No, it's not.
Ask me why.
No,
Let me
it's not.
finish,
The reason
Fatou.
why I said it's not, no,
Why?
Manjang. For example, Manjang, when he went to Social Security, the focus is to restructure.
Yes.
And to make sure we have best practices in place.
Absolutely.
And that was the reason why he was able to save us, the taxpayers, over $70 million.
So let me correct you. It's not you, the taxpayers.
I mean,
it's the
us,
pensioners.
The pensioners, us paying our...
Let me tell you, Fatou.
Mm-hmm.
Are you trying to say I should not have gone?
No, I'm not saying that.
No,
I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say... Okay, go ahead.
Let me ask you. Are you saying that the fact that I stayed in Dakar, I should have paid the party?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
What I'm trying to say here is, according to the report, what I'm trying to say here, for example, if Manjang is coming in to say, let's cut costs on this and this and this, and he is seen to be doing a certain thing that people are questioning, the people that you're leading, that's what I'm trying to say here.
I'm
not saying...
No, but hold on. Can I come? Number one, I'm not holding brief for him, and I'm not a proxy for him.
Okay.
But I want us to understand one thing and one thing alone.
Yeah.
The Gambia will not move if we continue to personalize and trivialize things.
Of course.
No, but listen. Trivialize things. Today, and like I said, our airtime right now is too expensive to be focusing on something that is so insignificant.
But that thing, that thing crossed a lot of...
No, it crosses a lot of lines because people...
That's what I'm saying. It's good to just clarify.
No, see,
nobody is trying to be...
Fatou, in the absence of credible information, the rumor mill thrives. And when the rumor mill thrives, it becomes the reality of people. And here, I think the problem here is the narrative. Mr. X has eaten something that wasn't deserving of him. Meaning, the 100,000 they're claiming, it wasn't an expenditure. It was an expenditure because he didn't make it home. He was somewhere else. So should he have taken money out of his pocket to pay when an airline scheduled flight didn't go as planned?
Was it not necessary to clarify that now?
No, that's not what I'm saying. But it should not have even gotten to this point.
No, that's what he just explained.
No, but hold on.
Yeah, he just explained that,
Fatou.
And that was necessary.
No, Fatou, but I have said this thing many times.
Yeah, but this is to my audience, so that they will understand.
No, I understand.
My audience would also want to know
I absolutely understand. But what I'm saying,
when you put when you put something out and say, "Hey, I'm having Mr. Manjang," these are the question.
But that's the narrative me and you need to change.
Let me tell you.
We don't have time. We have a country to build, and in building a country, We want the best and the brightest sons and daughters of this country to come on board and play their part. And what we have seen, castigating people, trying to brutalize people and their image, is not a good advertisement for would-be prospective Gambians to come and join our public service and make this country better. No one is going to make Gambia better but you and me, and especially people who are endowed with skill sets to make a difference. And right now, what we see in this country is an eyesore, and it's a turn-off for people to come and join public service.
You know, Fatou, I have been in Social Security for 3 years. Over all that 3-year period, that everybody keeps telling me is about the per diem. Fatou, if it was really about being corrupt and taking money.
They said also, you do a lot of favorism. You have your people, that some of them you approve loans for them before even probation period ends. You take people to scholarship. These are some of the things that come up as well.
There are certain things, really, I think will be wasting time. But let me address some of these points that you're referring to. People need to understand the rules and regulations of institutions before they make a statement. I have given car loans to some staff who joined recently. Recently, because they are at very senior executive levels. And therefore, we know that, frankly speaking, likelihood of confirming is okay. But there's nothing in the service rules which says you have to give a car loan only when somebody is
confirmed.
No. What if I hired you? When you hire people with loans from other institutions, what do? Don't you pay off their loans? Don't you pay off their loans?
Some don't.
No, but...
Oh, yeah, you do,
And what would you call that? The guy has not even started. You hired and you paid off their loan with the previous institution. What is that?
Paying off their liabilities.
How is it different? Somebody coming and is working for you at an executive level, if that person had a car where they're coming from, would we not have paid for the car? Would we not pay for the loan?
Precisely. Fatou.
What's the difference?
Fatou.
I guess people are relying on the service rules, which says, because I remember when I was in Gamtel, I'm just going to give you, I was in Gamtel, and then my meeting that approved 2 months into my service, they approved the car loan for me, and there was a big row because they said that was not in the service rules.
No, people saying not in the service rule and not in the service rule are not the same. I can send you a copy of the service rules. Well, sorry, no, I cannot send it to you now because I'm not there. But you can ask somebody to send you a copy of the service rules, whether there is, listen, I am very careful in doing certain things I do. So I would not do something which is completely, I am doing something which is within my discretion. And I know it is within my discretion. And I have done it. And all those people have been confirmed in service. And there is absolutely no problem. And they're delivering to the best of their abilities. People will talk about, the other point you want to talk about is about, I sponsored somebody who was on probation. No, it's not on probation. Now, also, let me put this thing again very, very clearly. It is so unfortunate in this country that anything that involves a woman, anything that involves a woman in this thing is never on merit. There is always something. There will always be, there is a relationship, he is dating, she is doing this. I mean, we need to stop that, Fatou. That is demeaning to the women of this country. When I joined Standard Chartered Bank, I joined, and within a period of 2 years or so, I was sponsored to do an executive MBA program. Why? Because they thought I had potential. They did not look at the time I have spent in the institution. I met people there who've been in that institution for years.
Absolutely.
But that is not how it is taken. If you look at the world around, they go and recruit people at early age. They have graduate entrance program. You come in, they treat you very special because they know you have a long track runway. You have a long runway, and you have the brains. They try to mold you and groom you and focus you so that because they're looking the interest of the institution to take it forward. This is no different. It was no different.
I quite agree.
And also, it was a guy and a girl. But every conversation I hear is about a girl. I mean,
but
let's respect
but
our
then
women.
Would it be also fair to say, for example, if we are, for example...
Fatou, I'm going to interject here.
Okay,
You need to understand one thing. Management have primary and secondary stakeholders.
Yes. Yeah.
The primary stakeholders of management are the investors, the people putting in money. Do you know that the noise we've been hearing about Social Security to date has never been about the interest of the people who put in money, but the people who should be working for those people who own the money? That alone is a red flag, because there is what you call a duty of care. When you are a custodian of funds, your first and primary interest is to safeguard the equity of the fund owner, the people who own it. Then the second step is to make sure you remunerate the people who are managing these funds, the employees. But all the noise we've been hearing is about welfare, welfare, welfare. That alone shows the self-centered nature of who we are. What happened at Social Security is just a smaller reflection of our society at a broader scale. And like I said, and I will always say, we will not usher in a new Gambia without cultivating a new Gambian. And the new Gambian must not only be objective, but the new Gambian who wants to partake in public life must be selfless. And these are traits that are lacking in our public sector. Some people go and opt for employment because they know there is no competition in terms of work. Reviews and performance are virtually non-existent. So guess what? They become what I call excess dead weights. They sit in the institutions and free ride in these institutions. What we need are people who are going to change institutions, and everyone who works in an institution, including the cleaner, carries his or her own weight. And that's one thing that this country cannot accept. And we need leaders, political and executive leaders, who are going to make sure that the new Gambian emerge and we bury the old habits of old.
So out of during this period, what exactly did the company lose? I know there's been, like you said, some of the projects have had to, to wait because there was an issue going on. Financially, how much did it affect the company?
Fortunately, we were still making investments. I mean, the noise was going on, but we were still making investments. So we were collecting. We were not collecting at the same levels that we were collecting. So really, our performance could have been better. We would have been in a much better place by now. We would have had systems in place. We would have been much more operationally efficient. People will not be waiting for. We've improved it, but people would have been we would have been presenting your checks on your retirement instead of you coming to knock on our doors. So yeah, there has been some. I mean, we've been derailed. There's no doubt about that. We've been derailed.
So now let's talk about the pensioners.
3
years to now, what has changed in the life of the ordinary pensioner? I mean, I had a pensioner call during your show for Modus and was delighted about how much they're getting now compared to what we're getting. But generally, what has changed in the life of the general pensioner?
No, well, we've at least been able to give them some increase, an average increase of at least 33%. Now, 33% is not that every pensioner got 33%. It's an average. There are some pensioners who are high-end in terms of what they earn. They are not getting that level. But the lower-end pension, so we've made sure that no pension, there's a minimum pension that anybody gets in the institution is at least 1,500. So at least you can buy a bag of rice and something. Before, pensioners were getting significant. Well, I don't know whether 75.
Someone said 75. I heard him say that on the radio.
But suddenly we've moved every pensioner to a minimum of 1.5. Now I think people need to also understand pension is driven by your exit salary. So if your exit salary is low, your pension will be low because that is what drives it. But what we have not been doing. So, for example, if you look at it since 2011, because of inflation and the fact that we have not been at least covering inflation, we've in effect been reducing the purchasing power of the pensioners over that time. So the reason for that 33%, it was aiming to at least offset some of the impact of inflation over the period. That is why we came to 33. So it's not just a number of air.
Yeah.
It was driven by reason, logic.
Fatou, I have a question that I wanted to ask Manjang. Before you come to the table, you must have equity, meaning you are a stakeholder.
Yeah.
And in board composition and board constitution, that's one thing that is very important. If you don't have equity, what are you doing there?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about board members. But the role that the government, through the Ministry of Finance, plays in Social Security, what is their stake?
The ministry doesn't have a stake.
Precisely.
The government does not have a stake.
Exactly.
Why are they in the board then?
No, not that they're not. I'm not even talking about their role in the board, but the stewardship that they want to take in terms of managing the affairs of the institution.
Yeah.
I think our Social Security Act needs to be revisited because you cannot empower someone who is not a vested party in the process. And I'm sorry to say, the government, by way of Ministry of Finance, is not a vested financial party to the fund. I haven't seen their monies in there.
No, they don't have a,
exactly.
They don't have a stake. I think what should happen, and I think it's unfortunate that Social Security is just treated as any other parastatal. Yes, right. Which is wrong, which is slightly wrong, because all other parastatals, government has a stake in there. In fact, not the state, government owns them, largely, except few. Gamtel is one of them. Gamtel actually, Social Security has a small percentage in there. But I think it's negligible. And even NAWEC, Social Security has a small percentage there, but it's negligible. Yeah. But anyway, they pretty much own those institutions and therefore can drive policy decisions. Yeah. The thing with Social Security, and I've been trying to advocate for this thing, what you need and what holds in other countries to have a regulator, a pensions regulator, because it is important, because these are people retirement funds, it is important that the trustees and the managers are not mismanaging those funds, that they are not unnecessarily exposing them to risks that will be detrimental to the ownership, that the returns that you are generating is reasonable, that your management cost is not excessive. That is important for a regulator to do. And by the way, there are also so many other pension funds, Pillar 3 pension funds in this country. For example, a lot of all these banks run their own in-house pension funds. Now, even though it is funded by the bank, but it is for the benefit of the employees. Now, clearly, some of those funds, some are investing it in themselves by buying deposit. Now, that is a no-no in pension.
Exactly.
Because if the company goes down, it goes with the fund. You know, so that is what a regulator should be doing. Now, I know because of the size of the country, when Social Security was set up, as is the case in many places, that role stayed with the ministry. But I think they have
competence is not there.
Yeah, that could be, but because for all the time I've been there, nobody has asked me about liquidity, or nobody has set for me any prudential guidelines as to what portfolio mix should be.
Exactly.
Where which sectors we should be focusing on. This is what regulators would be doing. But I think the problem is the ministry is looking at Social Security as a parastatal. And therefore, and I know under the Act, and not so much under the Social Security Act, but under the Public Enterprise Act, because it talks about where you have control. It doesn't have to be true ownership, but control in terms of appointment of the board and stuff like that. Maybe they're taking it from that angle, but it's definitely not the typical parastatal.
It's not best practice, and I've seen pension funds around the world, and also the same thing that's happening to Social Security is happening now with the real estate companies. They're collecting deposits. Yeah. They're not selling.
Yes. Yes.
And when you collect deposits, you need to be regulated. And the duty of care is for the government to make sure that there are safeguards to protect those depositor funds. And what we are seeing today, the competence at the Ministry of Finance, sorry to say, they don't have it. They're not trained to do that. And that's why the government needs to have a rethink and make sure that this country has a regulator not only for pension funds, but real estate companies, because at the end of the day, they're doing the same thing, collecting deposits.
Yeah, and it's actually, real estate is you know, it's quite risky.
It's high risk.
Some I'm sorry to say, some are Ponzi schemes.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, and so you need a regulator. I mean, any deposit-taking institution anywhere. I would have thought it's even appropriate. I know it's not defined as a financial institution, but the central bank must have a window within central bank to kind of regulate it, just for that aspect.
Because it can affect liquidity in the market. It can create lack of confidence in the market when these big institutions happen or sectors happen to crash. Therefore, it is the responsibility de facto of the central bank, being the monetary authority, to make sure that there are guidelines, if nothing else. Even if you don't regulate, have guidelines. If you don't regulate, have parameters in terms of their risk appetite. Right now, there's no threshold or risk management for a real estate company collecting depositor funds, how to invest those funds.
So it's my understanding, though, that the Ministry of Regional Government was looking into setting up some guidelines or some
competence once again. You see, I think the problem in this country is people tend to vie to occupy a space, public space, public encroachment. And doing so, sometimes they lack the requisite skill sets and toolkits to make sure that they can man that space they want to occupy. Same example once again. I've worked at the Ministry of Finance. What they've been looking in terms of Social Security is administrative, going to board meetings, championing government's courses, sometimes even coming to ask for loan from the Social Security to take care of public projects that government want to embark on, and they don't own it, number one. So that cozy relationship needs to be hived off, and the only way it can hived off is through a regulatory board.
So how do we protect the pensioners? Because I know the former government, we have all heard from the commission how you know, they will take money from Social Security to buy RAMs and all those stuff, and the monies never came back. And we are not saying that is happening right now, but there should be stability at Social Security, because obviously the money there is not owned by government, it's owned by the pensioners.
But you need regulators.
That's what I'm saying. How do we, because for example, if the president appoints the managing director of Social Security, and anytime he feels can go there and say, hey, go back home. And then, you know, if for example, if the minister comes in and they have vested interest and they look at this person and say, oh no, we cannot get through with this person, we'll get him away. If that continue happening, there will never be stability at Social Security.
Fatou,
and then that, you know, that affects the pensioners' money.
I always look at best practices.
Yeah.
You look at AARP, Association of American Retired People. The federal government doesn't have a say who the fund owners want to bring in. But guess what? The federal government made sure that there are regulatory agencies that curb the appetite, the risk appetite of these funds to make sure that monies are put in minimal risk to make sure that the pensioners get their return on their investments. So there are certain stocks they cannot buy at all. I don't care how good the returns are because of the volatility you know, inherent in those stocks. But in Gambia, our biggest problem right now, and not only Social Security, government still doesn't understand the role of government. And that is why, yes, I will say it, the government, and not this administration, generally from independence to date, the role of government is not understood by the very government who want to govern the people. Government must not be in the business of business unless the private sector cannot fill the space. That's why today the government should have sold Gamtel, Gamcell wholesale as is. Because telecommunication has matured to a point, private entities can do that. Then they worry about regulation. But the government to date, and they have inherited culture from 65 to date, that government must control. The role of government is not to control, facilitate and safeguard. That's the role of government.
Now after 3 years, what is the status of Social Security?
It's,
how is it looking?
It's built a lot of liquidity. Wow. So it's moved from 700 million to slightly over 2.1 billion.
In 36 months?
Yeah.
Wow.
And well, it's actually more than that, because that 2.1, we've actually purchased about 10.42% additional shares in GAM Petroleum of about 250 million. Wow. And we paid, we lent about another 119 million to GTSC, so which is about 370 million. So if you add that, you're probably looking more around 2.5 billion effectively. That's what we have grown it. But you know, I mean, I think that's possible because we are a lot more effective in our collection of contributions. If I take 2016 to 2017, 2018, just in one fund alone, Provident Pension Fund, we've collected like 50 million more. Not because we've increased institutions, but because we're effective in collection. In every single year, we've made in excess of 100 million in profitability. But clearly, we also took some impairment. So if you look at our reported profits, like 2019, we would make somewhere around 167 million profits. But the reported profit will be somewhere around 138, because there is 23 million which we have provided to do with land rates, which again dates back some years ago. We should have taken the expense a couple of years back. We did not. So we will take that expense in the 2019. But without that, just at an operating level, it's about 160 million or so. And 2018 was also in excess of 100 million profit. So all of these 3 years, it's like 80, then we jump to 140, then we jump to 167 in terms of profitability. And so that combined with what we are doing with effectiveness of collections, we're increasing the portfolio.
Okay. Based on your experience over the past 36 or less than 36 months, if you were to advise government today in restructuring the organization and the organizational processes plus legislation to make Social Security a more efficient and functional institution, what will that be?
Certainly, I think it is important to set up a regulator. That is very critical, not just for Social Security, but for every pension fund in this country. I think that is important. That will then make sure and capacitize that regulator to make sure they know what things to look for from the trustees and the management of the corporation. It will be important also in terms of how board selection, that it is effective that board selection, that the membership of the fund have a significant say in running the corporation. Now sometimes, like you say, like you do with the central banks, every member of the board must pass a fit and proper test. So you don't bring people to the board just for the sake of it. You bring people to the board because they have the requisite skills to sit and run. And in Social Security, it's very important you bring people with investment skills and investment abilities, because that will run. But not only that, it's all about the governance structure. I believe, and I really believe this, that there are too many people in Social Security. It doesn't necessarily need that number of people to run it. Now, I understand employment in this country is problematic, but I think Social Security can replace every single job they lay off. That is possible. So I don't think that should not be the problem. It should not be the problem we're losing employment. Social Security can lose the employment from Social Security itself, but create employment through investing in productive sectors.
Absolutely.
That is possible. So I think net over period. So the way I see it, it's going to be short-term pain, but for a longer-term gain. And I think it's important that we follow through those. We've started on some of these processes, and I think it's to allow the board and the management to implement some of the changes that should be.
And automation also, I really believe, because I've been around funds, especially in North America, and one thing I've noticed, the investments are heavily skewed on systems
yes.
than people. And it's systems that really safeguard investments, because that's where you get good modeling, that's where you have good data, and that's where you gather historical data sets to make informed decisions today and going forward. And I think that's one thing that's lacking in our Social Security Administration. And also, because sometimes people die. Our death and birth register in Gambia is very poor, and that also is a cost to Social Security Administration. Someone can pass on for 4 or 5 years and you're still paying.
Yeah. Fortunately, we do two things to kind of mitigate that problem. But you're right, it does happen. That is why we do this pension renewal option every 1 year or every 6 months. Now we try to bring it every 6 months. So you have to physically come so that we can verify that you are alive. You know, so at least to avoid, because like you said, because of that deficiency, you have to find a workaround around.
But that workaround is not efficient. What if the pensioner happens to have a stroke, lives in Basse, cannot move?
Sometimes we visit.
Yeah,
but it's not efficient. It's not.
And that's
totally
why I believe that the role of government, this is always critical. The government is yet to understand their role in society. The role of the government is to facilitate and create an environment for businesses to thrive. Today, we know that birth and registers are very poor in this country, and it's costing the government a whole lot, not only Social Security. That's why they have ghost workers on the government payroll. Government pay people who have been dead for years. So instead of the government trying to meddle in areas that's none of their concern, they should make sure they create an environment for institutions and businesses to thrive. And it's into their interest. Because today, if Social Security goes bust, the final recourse is to the state to take care of the safety net of those pensioners.
Theoretically, yes. In reality, no. There is no legal obligation on government to do any of those things. And it's a moral obligation, clearly, because if it fails, the societal upheaval will be such that it will be reasonable to expect that government will play. But actually, in theory, the risk of the FPS is on the member institutions because it's a defined benefit scheme. The risk of, I think you are on the NPF, so the risk of the NPF is on you. So if that NPF fails, you lose your money. And that is why it is very important that you have a say in the running, because yours is a defined contribution. So what you put in is known, but what you get depends on how it's managed.
So I know this is a basic question, but for somebody like me who worked in a Porestata and my company was paying contributions, and then, you know, now with your business, you go register, sometimes you have problems of having Social Security to match. They'll tell you, oh, that was because you're working in this company now, this is one is fresh. How would you?
There are two different schemes.
Yeah, so how
one is you cannot match the pension and the provident.
Okay.
The pension is a defined pension scheme, so it is defined. All the risk associated with that is on GAMTEL. So GAMTEL is guaranteed that when you leave your exit salary, they will guarantee your pension on that, so that when the investment drops, you will call on GAMTEL to fund that difference. Now, whereas the provident fund, you are saving and hoping that Social Security will manage it well and not only cover the effects of inflation, but give you a little bit more on top. You know, and that's the hope, because now you really don't have any say in how that is done. So when it fails, when they are successful, like people who have been...
That is scary though.
But that's the fact.
See, but the reality, I mean, that is the reality. And so, but when you have you see, banks, let's take banks for example, central bank. Central bank's role is to make sure they will tell banks, you cannot lend more than X amount. You cannot, you know, they will restrict where you, like I said, they have just told banks, you cannot pay dividend because of COVID. Now, they don't own any state, but they are the regulator. They are trying to protect the depositors. That is what you also need for a pension fund. It is taking deposit effectively. So your money is like a saving, you know. Right now, you know, a lot of the executive directives from the Jammeh government, 99 or maybe certainly over 90% of that money came from the Provident Fund. Now, it came from a fund, a risk of which is carried by the membership. So if Social Security fails to recover those monies, it means either they will continue not paying you interest for a very long time whilst they try to cover that loss, or recognize the loss, which is what they should do, and that every member who was a member at that point take a cut, a haircut. So basically, you slightly impair your capital. Today, that is roughly about 30%.
That's why Social Security should be everybody's business.
Well, it will be everybody's business if the Gambians understand what is at stake.
Yeah.
The biggest problem in this country is the rumor mill becomes people's reality.
Yeah.
And we are not fighting for the bread and butter issues. We are fighting for personal issues. And honestly, what we have seen at Social Security over the past 28, 30 months, to be honest, no one cared about the investor, the depositor. It was more about the welfare of the managers, the people who are managing the depositor funds. And that's what we need to change. But for us to change that, I think the governance structure of this institution need to change to a point. The owners of the money have a larger stake in terms of how, who, and what they're going to do with their money. And government has been the one with the largest stake about how, who, and what to do with those depositor monies. And they have zero deposits in those funds. So I think it's time for Gambian contributors towards our Social Security fund to wake up and take the responsibility and tell government, take a back seat. We will take the front seat, and you create guidance as it relates to policy. Guidance.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's it.
And you know, if a Social Security is managed well,
yeah.
In all countries, they actually play a significant role in economic development.
Absolutely.
You know, like I said, you know, when we started out, when we were talking about small businesses, what can be done, you cannot have any institution with that kind of long-term investable funds as a Social Security. You know, because like I said, they can afford to have a significant outlay for a very long period. Now, so if well managed, I mean, if you go to any other part of the world, I mean, Social Securities are doing tremendous jobs in growing the economies. Because you see, putting money in treasury bills is the least efficient form of investment.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
It is absolutely.
It's called parking money at a garage.
Yeah. I would not put my personal money in a treasury bill.
Precise. I agree.
I will not.
And unfortunately, that's why our banking system is very risk averse, because they have a free ride to make a decent return. And government's appetite to borrow is also fairly high. And that's the reason why we are not having long-term bonds, because most banks are just parking their monies at the central bank. And there's any bank in the world that's worth their salt. Their biggest investment is in risk mitigation. And in Gambia, you don't even need a risk mitigation unit, because bulk of your funds, you're taking it to a car park called Central Bank, who will give you a certificate called Treasury Bill, risk-free.
Wow. Well, this is a whole new thing for me, and I'm enjoying it, because I'm thinking Treasury bills are the, you know, the safest.
No, you know, Gambians, we invest in really two portfolios. It's property, treasury bills.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, none of them are really productive.
Oh.
Wow.
But, you know, it gives you maybe personal wealth in a property because of the appreciation of.
And for security as well, especially treasury bills. Right?
Who says government don't fail?
We need venture funds.
No, but who says government don't fail? Didn't you see Greece?
Yes.
Or before Greece,
Argentina?
Didn't you see Argentina? Didn't you see Cameroon? Didn't you see? Who says? They do. They do. In fact, I remember when I was in Cameroon, I was heading the treasury unit then, and we were buying government bonds at very serious, deep discounts. Maybe
Matter
like
of fact, our government here in Gambia was insolvent over the past years before 2016. If you look at the ratios, debt to GDP, for example, it means that Gambia was not a going concern. So we were bankrupt, but still moving.
So now that you have left, I mean, I know the obvious question is, do you know why you were removed?
Well, as everybody else, all I know is that there is the movement has happened for, how was it framed in the letter?
In the interest of the country, I don't know.
Yeah, but Fatou.
Yeah, I mean, there should be advice.
Fatou.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the world, I do work in finance, nowhere in the world, you know, you have what you call stars and dogs. You cannot take your star, someone or an entity that's giving you productive return on investment, and say you want to move them out. It means that the government really relegated their duties to the pensioners. Because if the interests of the pensioners superseded their personal ego interests, they would have allowed the Social Security as it was to continue under the leadership of whoever was bringing those decent returns. But no, it means they've put the pensioners second, and whatever egos or personalities they've put in first. And it only happened because of the weaknesses inherent in our public service. 2016, immediately after Jammeh left, most, if not all, Gambians were calling for public sector reform, civil service reform. And in civil service reform, the pillar, the most fundamental pillar, is security of tenure. Then people will do what's best for the positions that they're really holding. But today, that cannot happen because you are at the mercy of someone's pen to say you're relieved, you're fired, you're transferred. This is what Gambians need to fight for and change. A classic case study of bad governance architecture is what happened in Gambia 2 weeks ago, when a whole lot of people were moved. I would cite another case, Mr. Damfa of Trade, whose whole life, all he understands is trade and labor-related issues. Now you want to take him to agriculture or wherever you are taking him. What good are you doing for society? We need to hold our government accountable, and sometimes we need to pressure our government to come and be in the middle and do the straight and narrow, and that is to reform our public service by making sure we have strong institutions not led by strong men and women, but strong rules, regulation, and policies.
Are we in safe hands right now, Social Security? The work you have done. The work you have done.
Listen, I know Tambedu.
Have you put in structures that you think?
I know Tambedu fairly well.
Yeah.
I think he's competent. He's professional. I can only expect him to do what is right by the members of the fund, and I believe he will do. He's inherited a business that is very liquid, very strong foundations. So I expect him to be successful.
You did something
but
really
that should come with a caveat too. You expect him to be successful provided that
there's no interference.
That interference. And it's that interference that Gambians must push for their government to curb and desist from, because they are not primary stakeholders into those funds. Their monies are not there. If you don't have equity in something, you should not manage or steer the process.
And you did something that rarely is done by a Gambian, to reject, another appointment. I mean, we don't normally see Gambians doing that, resigning or saying no to a particular thing. And this is supposed to be something like an international appointment, Secretariat, Senegal-Gambia Secretariat. Why did you?
I am being very honest to myself. I was being told by some people that it's very lucrative. They pay in hard currency. It will pay you more than your
What
social
you get in
security.
Social Security, yeah.
It's not about the money.
Thank you.
It's not about the money. And this is, like I've said somewhere else, this is not the, I mean, I have done exactly this in my 20s. So people who know me will not be surprised by my decision. When I was in my 20s and I just came back here, you know, like they do, if you have a paper qualification, they think you've arrived, you now, you have the competencies to run. Because that's what we believe. If you have a degree or professional qualification, then you are. I was the head of finance at the GNIC when I started. Prior to that, I had never worked in my life, except I did like a 6 or 7 months as an audit junior in the UK. That was my only work experience. I have never managed people before. Really never sat at a management meeting or anything of that sort. So I came in without any work experience. I was the head of, I was excited obviously, because suddenly I have about 14 or so people to manage. I have an office, I have a personal assistant. But you know what I was doing? Every day I'll be sitting in my office, people come in and we'll just be chatting. That's effectively what I was doing. So I said, no, this is not good for me. I am unfair to myself. I want to learn, I want to grow. I resigned and I joined NIB, and I'm very grateful that I took that decision, because those years in NIB really formed the early career of mine. Because I joined now, I lost an office to now a pool office, you know, because NIB, you know, that time, Bax and this guy, you know, he had the American style of management. It was almost like an open floor plan, but they were all very young professionals. So that interaction really brushed well on me. So, so I lost the privacy of my own office. I lost a personal assistant. I no longer have people I'm managing, you know, and now I am instead, now I am reporting not even to the CEO, but I'm reporting to a line you know. But so I did it then, you know. So really, to then come again and say what you've offered me is not aligned to my competencies and skills, I don't have any problem saying that.
So what's next for Manjang? I mean, I see a lot of people on social media advocating for you to be in politics. Is there anything you're looking at? Because I see a lot of people advocating for that. And
Fatou, I want to interject before he answers the question. The interjection is, Gambia is where it is today because the likes of Manjang, myself, and many others refuse to dirty our hands into the political affairs of this country. And like Plato once said, politics must be the business of all, and if you refuse to partake in it, more than likely you'll be governed by your inferiors. Inferior, not that we're better than them in terms of character and personality, but competence. I think one thing we should learn from this saga is that it's high time we, the quote-unquote Gambians, who have a skill set and toolkit to take this country where it ought to go, to really do service to the country by coming out and be counted as the change makers and play their role in the political arena. So for me, I am not going to ask Mr. Manjang what is in your future, but I believe you have a role in shaping a new Gambia, and that role is for you to be a decision maker, and for that decision maker role to happen, you need to dirty your hands in politics. And I think it should not even be an option, but it must be a must.
A must.
And not only from you, but the likes of you. If not, we should all keep our mouths shut and stop complaining about what is wrong with this country.
You know, I was going to, I've reflected on this question severally. You know, I have severally reflected on the question. And I've said to myself, having seen firsthand what I've seen by being in public office, the waste that some civil servants and public officers do to this country, I will find it difficult to just stand by and not be involved. So somehow I have to find a way how I can contribute to the to moving this country forward. I don't think my conscience will allow me to do as many others, like what Nyang is saying. You know, we will refuse to partake and yet sit by the sidelines to criticize. That is not going to make a difference. That will not move us forward.
Yeah.
I think it's about time we all somehow join. Like I say to people, this is my only country, nowhere else.
Nowhere.
This is it. You know, I have nowhere else to go. So if it goes under, it goes with me. So whilst I can, I might as well try to play my part, you know, and keep it afloat.
And are we thinking about, you know, openly joining any political party, or, you know, even people are saying Manjang for president. Are you hearing that? Are you hearing on the corners?
Yeah, you know, sometimes people get excited. Presidency is a major thing.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of thinking and prayer, certainly.
Yeah.
It is something that I believe if I ever venture in it,
yeah,
I will be pushed rather than voluntarily getting into it. Now, I guess what I'm trying to tell you is it's not something I can give you an answer sitting here to say yes or no. But I'm not ruling myself out of anything for the purpose of this country. But you see, like I say, I'm not saying anybody is inherently corrupt, but there's so much temptations around. You need to ask yourself, can you withstand the temptation? You see, corruption is not just by what you take, but it's what you allow to happen.
Yes.
You know, it's what you allow to happen. Can you resist the temptations? We have seen what Yahya Jammeh does. And I have said it somewhere. You know, Yahya Jammeh, he goes around in this country and really telling people how much money he has.
Yeah.
And how he flouts that money everywhere. And we all look at him. But this guy is somebody we know. He was a soldier. He became president. And we know his salary for all those periods.
Yeah.
I have been an expatriate for almost the same time Yahya has been president. And I had all the benefits Yahya had. I had a free house, free medical, free school fees for my children, and free business class leave travel. And I cannot in my wildest dream accumulate the wealth he had. And I earn several times more than he earned. How come? And those are some of the fundamental questions. And what I find strange, that even now, you see that kind of thing displayed by some civil, and we are still clapping.
Yes.
And we are not asking. A lot of us believe that when you accept a gift, it is not corruption. It's a pact. It is not. That is given for a purpose.
Indeed.
You know, in the West, certainly in the private sector where I worked in, you will have a gift register. You know, you will have a gift register. So everything you received in your role, you will declare it. And it will go back to the institution. Where you cannot reject, because sometimes because of relations you cannot reject, you will take it, you will bring, you will register, and it will be displayed in the office, in the halls. It will be displayed. If it's an artifact, it will be displayed, because you cannot be given money. But it can be an artifact of value, but you can't take it home, regardless of which role you are in. I think we also need to move into something like that. But, you know, our culture seems to accept, you know, gifts as perks in office. So we need to move away from that. So it's two ways. It's not the official, but it's also us who are clapping. So we all need to reset our minds.
Thank you very much, Manjang. Nyanjai, this brings us to the end of this interview. Before we go, what's your final message to those Gambians, a lot of your admirers, but also a lot of people also criticize you, and generally to the pensioners. A lot of them are crying that you are not there. They're worried about their monies. And what is going to be your message to those people?
Yeah, two things. I want this debate about Social Security leadership not to be about me.
Yes.
I think clearly the decision-making process it itself, I think when we question, we should be talking really about just the decision-making process. Because I don't think they can get a better choice in Tambedo. So I think the pensioners should take heart that they have somebody like Tambedo in the role.
Yeah.
You know, I think he will do a stellar job. That's one. I am very comfortable. You see, criticism is actually very good for you. It's feedback.
Yeah.
You know, feedback can only improve you. You know, I don't have any issues people criticizing because I am not perfect. I certainly have made mistakes in Social Security, just like any human will do in any position you are. I have never ever claimed to be perfect.
Yeah.
Never. You know, and just as I am not complaining about people supporting me,
Yeah.
I am equally not complaining about people against me. This is part of life.
Yeah.
But I think it is important when we put things out, we really take the pettiness out. Let us focus on issues. Let us really focus on things that will move the country forward. If you notice, over all this period, even though I have been publicly crucified, I have really never tried to do by slinging mud on you because I don't see value in it. So I don't mind being criticized. I don't mind having discourse and debate with people on whatever you think I have done wrong. I have been put through a performance appraisal system for over 20 years or so, where people will look at me in the eye and tell me sometimes some very unpleasant things. And I will also look in the eyes of others and equally tell them unpleasant things regarding their performance. But it is about the job. It is not about me as a person. So I think we need to try and take personalities out if we want to move this country. Let's focus on issues. Let's debate issues. Let's address issues so that we can move our country forward. You know, we will not get anywhere in the pettiness. Yeah. You know, so I guess if there is a final message, that is what it is. But I think Social Security is in a good place. We just need to make sure that we put proper systems in place, i.e. Regulators and stuff like that, to make sure we don't. You see, it's a very long tail business. This is supposed to be generations to come, you know, and so we need to nurture it and make sure we do what is right. Pensioners is there, but you know, like I said, it's a young fund. So currently dependency is low, which means you have more active members than pensioners. There will come a time, like you are now having in America, and they're having a problem where you will have more pensioners, or where you have a dependency ratio which is very low. The pension fund here is about 40 years old or thereabout. You know, that is in a lifetime of one's employment. You know, so it's not really, it's fairly young. You know, so things can be very challenging if we do not properly manage the funds. We have failed before with Yaya's regime. We need to make sure we not only recover, but protect that sort of thing happening again.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Manjang, and thank you for your service as well. We do appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Nyangay?
Well, I'll say three things. Sitting down here talking to Mr. Manjang reminded me of someone I read in my past called Francis Scott Keyes, an American, defining a patriot. A patriot is someone who is cognizant of duty and honor to country. Duty and honor to country is someone who sees and feels that they have a responsibility to partake in the development of their country. Yes, he has done so until he has hit a dead end, but that dead end is just an intermittent interruption towards the continuous and perpetual duty and honor he must have for country. So not only for Manjang, but many like the likes of Manjang, who are all over the world and should have been here to make this country of ours a better place than our fathers and forefathers gave us, is that we all need to calm down, stop complaining, and make sure we are agents of change. And I welcome you, Mr. Manjang, to be an active agent of change in the Gambia to usher in a new Gambia. And talk is cheap. Talk is very cheap. And we must do this by action. So I hope I will see you someday, somewhere in the political space, advocating for a better Gambia, and many others like you must come and emulate what you have done. If we do that, we will then pass on Gambia to the next generation of Gambians, and our kids will not ask us, what did you guys do for us? And for me, this is why I can't keep my mouth shut, and I keep on talking, because when I put my head on the pillow, I can hear my son telling me, that's an embarrassment. And the reason why it's an embarrassment, our forefathers gave us a better Gambia that we are living in today. And we are more educated than our forefathers. So what have we lost? The integrity matrix has a big deficiency in the Gambian. The moral duty to honor and country has a big deficit, and the self-centered nature of the Gambian is collectively putting us back, because if I start thinking me, I may be individually prosperous, but I am still in a cocoon called Gambia, and the greater good are not prospering. Therefore, it's the responsibility of all to come on board and make this country better. And also, for the people who are in public offices today, we don't hate you. We have a moral responsibility to our conscience and country to call things out as and when we see it. And it's never personal. So on that note, thanks for having me once again in a place I used to call home. And
this is still
happy
home.
Mother's Day to all, especially my mom and wife.
This is still home, though. This is still home.
Happy Mother's Day to all the beautiful women out there. I think they really deserve a special day dedicated to them.
Thank you very much, and it's a happy Mother's Day to you all watching us. Thank you for everything you do for us at home, from being a baby to growing up. You know, I want to say a special happy Mother's Day to Auntie Mami, my favorite mom, all the way in Maryland. She's so supportive.
Oh, I have to say a very happy, special Mother's Day to my wife. Why did I not say
Madam Manjang, happy Mother's Day to you too.
And suddenly my mother.
Yes. Wow. Thank you very much to all of you, and Mrs. Njai, happy Mother's Day. Thank you very much to all of you watching, to the technical crew, Charles and Sire. Thank you very much. Until we come your way another time, we will be having Mr. Manjang often. He needs to be dragged to be coming to be talking more often. I think it's important to, you know, like you said, it will be good to always having you. And Yang Jai, you know, welcome back home. All right?
Well, just welcome on my passing. I'm not back home. I was just passing today.
Well, let's talk about that later. Thank you very much, and bye-bye to you all. See you another time. Bye-bye. Bye.
We live in a day and age where technology is creating a world without borders, filled with unlimited potential to improve the lives of the people around us. Innovarex Global Health ushers in a new way of leveling the playing field with increased access to quality healthcare services delivered at your doorstep. Our qualified professionals are equipped with state-of-the-art point-of-care testing technology to conduct tests such as kidney function, liver function, electrolyte tests, body composition, hemoglobin, A1C, and many more services with the highest efficiency in delivering results. The addition to our flagship, Wellness on Wheels, more fondly known as WOW Delivery Service, brings the entire clinical experience full circle. By IGH has remained committed to creating the future of healthcare delivery. Gone are the days of sending loved ones outside the country for basic medical services. Innovarex Global Health offers a new peace of mind and takes pride in delivering the quality of care we all deserve.
Love like fire. Wow. Love like fire. Xam ngeen rek affaire bi xam ngeen fan la? Skincare la. 2020 lañ wax de. Waaw. Fii nag mooy Kerr fan Kerr zero tache. Perfect skin. Skincare saa su ne rek niñ ko dee defee rek loo lañ soxlaati rek maanaam bu ngeen am problème ci seen skin yéen xam ngeen fan la fii ngeen di ñëw suma xarit yeeg am di jàmm yi nga xam ne taas daf lañ sonaloon xam nga doon xeesal ba la ka xum éneew ma lañ ko nag waaye just in case comme ni ko gars yi di waxee rek en cas just in case loolu xew xam ngeen fi ngeen di ñëw fii ngeen di ñëw Skincare Plus si yu baax rek la ñoo dox nag ay baax rek fu ne la ñoo dem ci réew mi di lañ indi rek nag products yu baax du Paris du Italie du USA du fi mu nekk nii sax boole nañ ci nag Sweden fu nekk lañ leen a indilee products bu dee tamit nag da nga ñuul rek ñu lay jamaa natural beauty that melanin dripping we do have stuff for you as well emuñ si skincare products rek ñu ngi ci cuub yi tamit fu ne la ñoo jaar in fact sax last commercial bi ñu defoon waxuñ leen woon dañoo dox ci ay kawar 9A grade rek nag waaw we do have bundles as well hair si lu ne la ñoo dox ñun ñu ngi ci rafetal jigéen rek luy taaral jigéen rek waaw boo leen di tukki tamit bëggoon rek classic suitcase ñu dañoo dox ci ay Samsonite duñ dee indi any brand of suitcases though other than Samsonite comme li ma dee wax rek boo eggee airport dëri Samsonite dafa am nuñ laa xoolee waaw ngeen ne lan nag waaw skin ci moom la ñu gën a xamee nag skincare products ci moom la ñu gën a xamee ñu ngi dox tamit bentee tamit si ay dàlla man waaye man nag skincare mooy suma specialty xam nga rek jigéen bu sa xar kanam réglé loo def mu jag am nañ Patricia Reiner Kiwi Eye the whole range Lighten Up Gold Tomatine I mean the list can just go on and on and on and on lépp loo xam ne rek luy taaral jigéen la ci yooyu rek la ñoo dox Skincare Plus nag emuñ si Gambia rek ñu ngi United States ñu ngi Gambia fii ba pare bu dee yaa ngi anywhere in Europe mun nañ la ko mail within 3 days rek ñetti fan rek nga jot say diw emuñ si loolu rek dañ laa consult tamit balaa ñu laa jaay diw dinañ def a free consultation pour wax la rek exactly li nga xam ne moo méngoo ak sa kanam dinañ leen wax tamit ne rek am nañ perfumes you know fragrances men's shirts accessories we do dresses as well we do blouses I mean we do shoes name it we do them Skincare Plus 2020 is our year of perfection zero task fi mu nekk nii réew mi fii kenn waratu fi task kenn waratu fi am problème kanam kenn waratu fi am problème yu picca boo ko amee dafa fekk ne rek ñëwuloo ci place bi fii
Love like fire. Bring my love like fire.
Stewart & Co. Solicitors, a legal excellence firm in London that can help you with all aspects of your legal work. If you are looking at immigrating to the United Kingdom, Stewart & Co. can help you to set up business, buy houses in the UK, and will deal with all your legal works from start to finish.
For all your general immigration work, we can help you with that as well. If you're applying for any form of visa, whether student visas, settlement visas, marriage visas, or a child wanting to come to the United Kingdom to settle with the family, we can help you to achieve your goals.
Stewart & Co. Solicitors, a legal excellence firm specializing in conveyancing, immigration, litigation, family law, personal injury, licensing, no win, no fee. Contact us today at www.sk-solicitors.com.
No, ini bara. Okay. Welcome. Basically, lot of lala me along is cool, man. That I can really relax. What the madam? Yeah. What the madam? Yeah. Let them do somebody. That's right. Grand Villa. That's fine. Slowly. Yes. No. Yeah, actually, a lot of people are basically me alone can very relaxed. So the two is going to happen on this screen. Nina Fanny say what? Nidia, Nena Granville is the best guest house in the Gambia.
Beji andikam Grand Villa Guest House. Na labungul bebe senyaring adu na bungul bebe nyarandiring coming ibela fila ila suwe taranyame. Intel Grand Villa na kiliano la lafino wale mukangwati intel kang. Na ye sabati Grand Villa yela kodo na fa kalamuta.
Oh man, this is like a paradise. I know. Come on, I so much love this place. Yeah, thank you. Trust me, I love this place. You come to somebody and you're watching one. Manjang and you want to Gambia. Grand Villa. I tell you. I love this place. Okay. I love this place, man. Oh yeah.
Ni lafta na kuo keso sotola. Futama Oljuntum Paradise Estate. Mbaya kumandiroke 7527-218. Wale futana website auto www.grandvillaguesthouse.com. Grand Villa Guest House.
Miss B Designer Outlet is the #1 quality and affordable stop shop for all your needs. Get your evening dresses, suit and ties, office wears for both ladies and gentlemen, beach wears, sport wears, pure leather shoes for men, quality belts, bags, heels for our beautiful ladies, original perfumes, accessories, and a lot more. find us at Kololini Road opposite Gaddafi Mosque at the Aqua Preacher Station, or call us on 295-3411 or 764-2486. Miss B Designer Outlet. Shop right, look good.